In the art of war, landmines are not merely inanimate blocks of explosives, but tools to control the will of the enemy. Ukrainian combat engineers on the Eastern Front have elevated this principle into a brutal orchestration by laying out a dense matrix of TM62 mines while deliberately leaving exposed a tempting safe corridor. By completely manipulating the Russian reconnaissance system, they lured an armored convoy straight into a kill zone guarded by waiting missiles and drones. The distance between false safety and 12 minutes of swift slaughter lies in just a single wrong decision by the Russian commander. On the fragile boundary of the death zone, is a perfect escape route ever truly a path to survival, or is it the very pit of an elaborately staged slaughterhouse? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Now, let's begin the analysis. The Eastern battlefield never forgives carelessness, but sometimes, excessive caution itself becomes a death sentence. On a narrow strip of land covered by the gray fog of gunsmoke, Ukrainian combat engineers have begun a brutally cruel mind game. They are not merely laying mines, they are designing a stage for an impending tragedy. With 120 TM62 anti-tank mine steel plates filled with high explosives capable of tearing apart the undercarriage of any heavy tank, Ukraine created a deadly wall stretching 200 meters. However, the crux of the plan did not lie in the density of the minefield, but rather in a gap 150 meters long and about 20 meters wide running along the main road axis. This was not a technical error. It was a safe corridor, meticulously calculated down to the centimeter by Ukraine, a tempting bait placed right in the center of the kill zone. To ensure the enemy took the bait, Ukraine executed a highly risky but extremely brilliant move. They deliberately left a few mines protruding above the ground, exposing them to the lenses of reconnaissance equipment. This sophistication played into the enemy's psychology of underestimation, creating an illusion of negligence on the part of the Ukrainian army. And exactly as planned, Russian flycam drones quickly detected this anomaly. The images of the dense minefield alongside a completely clean gap were immediately transmitted back to the command center. Shortly after, a Russian combat engineer squad was dispatched to verify the field. In the shadow of complacency, they confirmed that this path was completely free of explosive obstacles. The Russian intelligence system had operated mechanically and accurately, but they were completely blind to the contextual trap that Ukraine had laid. At the Russian command headquarters, high-ranking officers stood before a highly promising operational map. In their tactical mindset, a mine-free gap in the middle of a dense minefield usually left only two possibilities: either a fatal oversight by Ukrainian combat engineers, or a path intentionally left by the Ukrainian defense forces to organize a counterattack or retreat. Confidence began to overpower skepticism. They believed they had read the enemy perfectly, having found an Achilles heel to thrust deep into enemy lines. The decision was made swiftly and decisively. Attack immediately along this corridor to create the element of surprise. A battle-hardened armored formation was quickly assembled, consisting of a T-72B3 tank serving as a fire escort, 2 BMP, 2S fully loaded with motorized infantry, an MTLB utility vehicle, and a Tiger command vehicle, a symbol of flexibility and power on the battlefield. As the diesel engines began to roar, spewing out plumes of pitch-black smoke, the convoy proudly advanced into the mine-free path without realizing that every turn of their tank treads was rolling on a predetermined route leading straight into a slaughterhouse. The truth about the minefield had not changed, but its meaning had been completely steered away by Ukraine. That corridor was not a path to survival, but a guiding funnel, tightly squeezing the convoy into a narrow space where they could not disperse, could not evade, and certainly could not turn back. Everything was set for one of the most devastating collisions Russia had ever had to endure. The tranquil space of the early morning was torn apart by the deep roar of armored tank engines. The Russian convoy advanced into the safe corridor in an exemplary formation, the distance between vehicles maintained just enough for observation, yet close enough to support one another. However, in the eyes of the Ukrainian soldiers holding their breath and hiding behind bushes and camouflaged fortifications, this convoy was no different from a flock of sheep wandering into a slaughterhouse. At this moment, the role of the surrounding TM62 minefield had completely changed. They were no longer passive explosives waiting for the enemy to step on them, but had become invisible steel walls, more solid than any concrete block. Ukraine had calculated that, once the gunfire rang out, a soldier's instinct would be to scatter to both sides of the field, to seek cover or deploy a return fire formation. But here, that action was synonymous with instant suicide under the pressure of anti-tank mines. The minefield had accomplished its task of locking down the combat space, turning the 20-meter wide strip of land into a giant iron cage where the only escape routes were moving forward or backward, both of which were paths leading to oblivion. The carnage began with a vivid blue flash tearing across the sky. When the leading T-72B3, the steel fist, and the protective hope of the entire convoy hit the exact landmark marked on the crosshairs, the Ukrainian Stugna P missile team to the west received the order to fire. The immense heat of the shape-charged warhead pierced the turret armor, detonating the ammunition magazine inside and turning the modern tank into a giant torch in less than a second. Before the terrifying explosion could even fade, exactly 2 seconds later, a second Stugna P missile from another position soared out, slamming straight into the MTLB that was awkwardly maneuvering at the rear of the formation. This fragile armored vehicle had no chance to retaliate. Its tracks were blown off and it burst into raging flames, officially slamming shut the avenue of retreat for the entire unit. The classic block the front, block the rear tactic of guerrilla warfare was perfectly recreated by Ukraine using high-tech weaponry. The Russian convoy was now jammed tight between two burning wrecks, lying exposed on the narrow strip of land, unable to budge. The true nightmare only now began to crash down upon the remaining Russian soldiers inside the 2BMP-2S. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped in a kill box designed to leave no survivors. From the east, 2 Ukrainian Javelin missile teams initiated their strike. Unlike the direct trajectory of the Stugna P, the Javelins soared high into the air and then suddenly plummeted down onto the roof where the armored vehicle's plating is weakest. 2 consecutive explosions rang out, turning the 2BMP-2S into twisted piles of scrap metal. The blast pressure hurled the soldiers inside outward, but the ground they landed on was far from safe. Ukrainian PKM machine guns from concealed positions began sweeping the area with enfilading fire, burying 7.62mm bullets into anything that still moved. There was nowhere to hide, no corner to take cover. Every square meter of this road had its fire trajectory meticulously calculated by Ukraine. At the rear of the convoy, the Tiger, a command vehicle known for its extreme mobility, was frantically throwing it into reverse, trying to find the tiniest gap to escape the hellscape. But Ukraine had not overlooked a single detail in this scenario. From above, a swarm of FPV drones carrying high explosive warheads were already waiting like predatory hawks. The buzzing sound of their electric propellers was now even more terrifying than the roar of cannons. The first drone swooped down at breakneck speed, crashing straight into the roof of the Tiger command vehicle and creating a fireball that completely wiped out the coordinating brain of the convoy. It took a mere 20 seconds for the first 4 vehicles to be completely disabled, and within the next 12 minutes, Ukraine turned a confident Russian advance into an armored graveyard. This was no longer a battle, it was a systematic execution, where multi-layered firepower, ranging from anti-tank missiles and machine guns to kamikaze drones, coordinated perfectly to crush all resistance. Those 12 minutes stand as a powerful testament to the collapse of a rigid military doctrine in the face of the Ukrainian army's supreme flexibility and cunning. The vehicle wrecks, billowing thick black smoke in the middle of the quiet field, became a monument to a fatal mistake in intelligence assessment and battlefield command. As the thick columns of black smoke from the wreckage of the T-72B3 tank and the BMP-2 armored vehicles began to billow high into the sky, another horrifying reality truly revealed itself to the Russian soldiers lucky enough to survive the initial wave of firepower. They were no longer in a fair fight. They were trapped in a mathematical nightmare where every variable led to a fatal outcome. These soldiers jumped out of the burning vehicle compartments, their bodies stained with smoke and their ears ringing from the deafening explosions, but immediately, they realized they were standing amidst a double scythe of death. A grim dilemma emerged. If their survival instinct urged them to leave the road surface to seek cover amidst the lush green field, they would immediately detonate the TM-62 mines lying in wait beneath the thin layer of soil. Conversely, if they chose to remain on the narrow asphalt road, the safe corridor that had now become a slaughterhouse, they would have to face the continuous sweeping bursts of PKM machine gun fire and the FPV drones hovering like a swarm of hornets overhead. This despair was no coincidence. It was the result of a brutal, tactical, and psychological calculation by Ukraine. Every square meter of land at this moment was an enemy of the Russian army. Video footage from Ukrainian drones captured the sight of enemy soldiers floundering, running back and forth among the vehicle wrecks crackling from the high heat, before being taken down by precisely dropped grenades from above. No orderly retreat was feasible when every path had been tightly locked down by the initial arrangement of the combat engineers themselves. The psychological collapse occurred even faster than the physical destruction. Seeing their comrades torn apart by mines the moment they stepped foot into the field, or relentlessly pursued by drones on the exposed road surface, the fighting will of the remaining men completely shattered. They were no longer a combat unit, but merely individuals struggling within a system of destruction operated with mechanical precision. Looking beyond the smoke and fire of the battlefield, this ambush is a prime example of the staggering return on investment wrought in the art of asymmetric warfare that Ukraine is applying. Let us look at the devastating numbers on the economic scale. The Russian side had just thrown into the void a massive fortune, a new generation T-72B3 tank, 2 BMP, 2S, an MTLB, and a Tiger, with an estimated total value ranging from 5.7 million to 7.8 million USD. That is not to mention the irreplaceable loss of 20 to 25 battle-hardened soldiers and commanding officers' personnel who had been trained for many years. In contrast, to execute this brutal performance, Ukraine spent only a modest budget of around $417,000, including a few Stugna-P and Javelin missiles, a handful of aging Soviet-era TM-62 mines, and a few cheap FPV drones. Most notably, Ukraine suffered absolutely no human casualties. This exchange ratio is not merely a military victory, but a fatal blow to Russia's defense economy, proving that primitive means combined with intellect can crush inflexible modernity. However, the most terrifying aspect of this battle does not lie in the burnt-out vehicle wrecks or the million-dollar damage figures, but in the strategic nightmare it leaves behind in the minds of Russian military planners. Ukraine executed the ultimate move in the art of manipulation. They used the truth itself to kill. The mines were real, the gap was real, and the Russian intelligence reports were also entirely truthful. Death came from Russia trusting factual data too much while forgetting that the battlefield is a living entity, where information can be bent by context. Ukraine's readiness to leave a path to survival was, in fact, their way of shaping the path to death for the enemy. Following this battle, whenever a Russian commander sees a safe corridor on a reconnaissance map, a profound suspicion will envelop them. Is it an enemy oversight, or just another slaughterhouse that has been prepared over the past 2 weeks? This paranoia will paralyze the decision-making process, making the Russian army slower, more hesitant, and more vulnerable than ever. Ukraine did not merely destroy a convoy, they poisoned the enemy's faith in their own intelligence system. This inescapable collapse is the very pinnacle of the script written by Ukrainian combat engineers, where the enemy dies due to their own confidence in what they see with their own eyes, which is, in reality, merely an elaborately staged lethal illusion. This horrific defeat is not merely a loss of military hardware, but it officially goes down in the history of campaigns where Ukraine turned Russia's own decision-making process into a weapon against them. The enemy did not fall due to a lack of information. They died because they placed their complete trust in pieces of intelligence data that seemed absolutely accurate but were, in reality, deceptively orchestrated. That is the art of war of the 21st century, where the boundary between a lifeline and a mass grave is as fragile as a single thread. When confidence turns into a noose, all firepower becomes meaningless in the face of the ingenuity and cold resolve of the homeland's defenders. In the darkness of the command bunkers, a chilling message still lingers. Right at this moment, in some Russian command post, another combat engineer officer might be staring intently at a map, analyzing a newly discovered minefield in search of another safe corridor. He might be smiling at a promising gap, preparing to sign the order for a new armored formation to advance straight into a place where death has long been waiting. The cycle of destruction has not yet ceased, and these bloody lessons still seem insufficient to awaken minds mesmerized by the illusion of overwhelming superiority. Modern warfare is not for those who are sluggish in their thinking. What are your thoughts on this brutal yet brilliantly calculated art of laying traps by the Ukrainian combat engineers? Could this be the key to shifting the dynamics of the battlefield in the future? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our in-depth analyses and dissections of the most dramatic hidden corners of modern warfare.